So,
Okay.
thanks for doing the interview with me again. Uh, for my personal project, I'm doing community and service and how it relates to 9/11 in the community of Tribeca. I'm doing interviews with people in my community who I feel have a story to tell and were an important factor during that time. And because it's the 10th anniversary of 9/11, I'm focusing on how the events of 9/11 affected you with your community and how you do service now. So, just want to ask you a few background questions about your experience of 9/11. Can you tell me where you were and your experience on that day?
I was right here in this apartment. I was standing in the middle of the living room holding my 1.5-year-old child. And I face uptown, but my neighbor has the same set of windows and they face downtown. And we're on the 35th floor, right in front of the World Trade Center. We're about 4 blocks above the World Trade Center, so it was pretty close. And this building shook when the plane that hit it first went over. And I remember holding my child and saying, what kind of idiot, what is that? What kind of idiot flies so close? And then we heard this huge explosion. It literally impacted this building, the explosion, made it shake. And then the world changed. There was a knock on my door, and my neighbor at the time was, she was wheelchair bound, and she was a little old lady. She was like the surrogate Jewish grandmother to my daughter. And her caregiver knocked on my door and said, Jimmy, could you come next door? Ida wants you. Something happened. And I didn't know what happened. And then the nanny for my daughter showed up. My wife had already left for work. She was opening a store in Soho. And they were going to have the big gala on Thursday. And this was a Tuesday morning. And I walked next door. And like I said, like these windows behind me, our windows faced the World Trade Center. It was right in front of it. And I saw this big gaping hole and black smoke billowing out. And I said, oh, something very terrible. The plane hit the building. She said, yeah, we saw there was a plane. The shadow went over the building, and the shadow went over this building too. And there was a big explosion. I said, well, it's a terrible accident. But it looked so suspicious. It was just the clearest day in the world ever. It was like robin's egg blue, and the sky, not a cloud in it. And I thought, there's nothing in the sky but the World Trade Center, and this guy hit it. It's hard to believe. But, and then things started to unravel from then on. I picked up, Ida's husband used to be a sniper in the Second World War, and he had passed away, and I knew him. His name was Paul. We'd lived there for a while, long time. And I picked up his binoculars, and I could see what looked like debris falling was actually people jumping out. The heat must have been so horrific that you'd see people just leap into the air and spin, and some people just, come running out of the hole, or jumping up off the windows, holding hands and stuff like that. And I guess she saw I was looking through the binoculars, and I put my baby down on the floor, and she said, what's the matter? What do you see? What do you see? What's going on? And I didn't want to tell her. I saw a lot of people jumping to their death. And I said, oh, something really terrible. It's something really terrible. And we had the radio on, the electricity in these buildings went out because we're that close to the World Trade Center, and we were kind of stranded up here. It's 35 flights down, all the lights went out. And luckily we had a portable radio, radio with batteries. And we started listening to the news, and I called my wife trying to get back in touch with her, telling her to come home. And finally I got through to the MoMA store, which hadn't opened yet. And she said, I'm trying to get everybody out of here. I have to get everybody, And then it was 18 minutes, and all this happened, and 18 minutes later we saw everybody, I guess, from whatever floor they flew in and hit. I think it was the 80th floor around there. They must have run upstairs. And also the sound, it was like bedlam. When the first plane went in, the explosion must have triggered every alarm in Lower Manhattan. So store alarms, car alarms, and people were running. And, you know, anyway, I said, come home as soon as you can. And within a few minutes, and I kept looking at, like, you know, through the binoculars, and it was like in, I don't know, rap fascination. It's like a perverted, you know, everybody slows down to see a crash. Couldn't take them, you know, it's, all the people ran up on the, you know, there was that restaurant, Windows on the World. All the people must have run upstairs. And they were waving tablecloths, I guess because they had these big white tablecloths, you know, waving them to be rescued. And I assumed that they were going to be, you know, helicopters would land and take those people off, and, you know. And it was between when the first plane went in and the second plane hit, there were 18 minutes. So nobody knew what was happening. And, you know, there was all these crazy reports coming through the radio. And then we saw this plane coming from the Jersey side, and it's really banked hard. And at first I thought it was a rescue plane, but it was like they wouldn't send a plane to rescue people, or just maybe a reconnaissance, but it was a jet. And then he hit the side of World Trade Center 1, you know, the one further downtown. And then you knew it was an attack, you know, it wasn't an accident. And that's the real, you know, wow, we're under attack, you know, it's just, you don't know. I didn't want to run. People were running out of the building and evacuating, or just, you heard all these crazy reports. There were 8 planes out, and, you know, this, and I kept on trying to get in touch with my wife to come home. And it's just the strangest day of my life. It's just the strangest day ever, you know. My daughter was on the floor, and I remember seeing Ida's caregiver. Ida was in a wheelchair, asking me what's happening, and the woman Ann, who's my daughter's nanny, she was sitting in a chair crying. And I looked over, and Desiree, who was Ida's caregiver, was like a little girl. People do funny things. She was like a little girl in the corner. She was just facing the corner. You know, you couldn't see. She just went in the corner and faced the corner. She didn't want to be, you know. My daughter was on the floor. Ida had this crazy toy. It was like a mounted fish. And you pushed the button and it would sing a song. And it was a Bobby Ferrin song. And she was playing with it and laughing. And she thought it was a party because we were all together in the neighbor's house. And the fish would turn around, and it's a largemouth bass, and sing, don't worry, be happy. Bobby Ferrin, you know, don't worry, be happy. And I thought, it doesn't get stranger than this. Eventually my wife came home. We were all sequestered up here, waiting to see what happens. You know, you don't know if you run into it or away from it. That night I went downstairs and got 4 gallons of water. I'll never forget. I walked all the way up to Soho, got Mexican food and brought it back, and our neighbor down the hall, a guy named Jonathan, he came. We were all like in the same apartment. Everybody else on the floor had left, and when I was bringing back the you know, I don't know, you think you get water because you might be trapped up there. So I brought 4 gallons, and then I had to carry it up 35 flights, which I'll never forget. I was really out of shape, and you know, we sat and ate together. Put everybody to bed, and I, you know, wait for what happened the next day was, you know, the evacuation. They were coming through the buildings. Everybody's got to get this building. They didn't know if it was, you know, it was affected structurally from downtown. You know, there was a couple of buildings, World Trade Center 7. Then the buildings fell, right? You know, and they just, I was like, can that happen? It's bad enough that they got crashed into, but then they fell in on each other. I had a good friend of mine who was a fire captain up on 13th Street, and he was in Ladder 3. He was a real fire hero. His name was Patty Brown. He was a real card-carrying hero, the most heroic guy I've ever known. And I left a message. I know you must be over there. I hope you're not. Be careful. And then after I left that message, somewhere, you know, sometime after that, the buildings fell. Later on I heard that they were telling him and his guys to get out, and they were working. You know, those guys just ran into the building, and they said, we're on the 42nd floor, we're bringing people down. None of them left. They kept on bringing people down and trying to rescue them. And him and all